You probably walked by a boring business this week and never realized that it was printing money. Laundromats, vending machine, trash pickup, janitorial services. These are all things that I know I don't really recognize when I'm walking down the street or when I'm going about my day. But quietly, they're making the owners millions. And in today's video, we're breaking down why that is. I'm Tony, and I help people escape the 9-to-5 grind by buying boring businesses. Nothing flashy, just things that catch up from day one so that they can quit their jobs as soon as possible. In today's video, I'm going to be breaking down how to do it step by step. Any successful business is going to come down to solving an essential problem. And a lot of the tech startups that you'll hear about are more flash than actual substance because they're not necessarily solving a need in the market. If there's no product market fit, the business is not going to be successful. So you'll see a lot of tech startups. Doesn't mean they're profitable or making the owners money, because a lot of times they're backed by venture capitalists and they're in a lot of debt. Versus a boring business is something that's going to be solving an essential problem. And so you're going to see laundromats that will solve, for people that don't have washing machines in their units, vending machines. People don't necessarily want to go stock, drive around a ton to a grocery store. If they're at a location, they want to get just a quick snack. So that solves a problem. And so boring businesses are going to be solving essential problems, things that are just kind of small that you might not think about. And they can go up to, huge problems, but it's, again, not going to be super flashy, not like you're going and getting a bunch of private equity money to go start it. They can usually be funded by SBA loans, which is the Small Business Administration loans, or they can be financed through seller finance called self-liquidating assets. All right, how do you find a boring business? So honestly, just having the awareness is critical, because that's going to open up your brain to so many different options out there. Because on a day-to-day basis, you're going to come across so many small businesses. Versus if you're going to a barber shop, you're going to start noticing that, start asking your barber some questions if they own the shop, see if it's something that you might be interested in doing long term. Or you go to a car wash, or you go to this different auto shop. There's so many businesses out there. Just having the awareness alone is going to really, really expand your mind. But then number two is then you find one that you actually like and you've done some research. It sounds like a good business. It's profitable. It's relatively simple to start, and the failure rate's pretty low. Then you can actually reach out to some owners. If it's somebody that just reach out to them directly. And you never know, if you're asking somebody about their business, they might actually bring up that they're looking to sell it. So that might be an opportunity for you. And then another way is to send mailers. I'll put a link to something I send to laundromat owners just as a template that you can use. And you just reach out, and they'll usually call you. You'll have to send a good amount of letters to start getting calls, but they'll call you and be like, yeah, actually I am looking to sell the business. And at that point you can ask them some questions and then try to set up a coffee or a lunch to try to dive a little bit more into the business, and then you can go over financials and go about the process a little bit more. But just getting that conversation started is really important. So mailers is one way to do it. Pretty easy to do. And then you can even do phone calls, you can send emails, you can walk into the business and try to talk to the owner. So there's a lot of ways to get in front of somebody, and then we'll break down what to do once you actually find an opportunity and you're interested in moving forward later in the video. But that's how you find some locations or find some businesses to buy. Now, those are some off-market ways to find businesses. There's also something called Biz Buy Sell, which is very similar to real estate. It's basically like an MLS, but for businesses, and you can go on there and look at various businesses and see what they're asking for price wise, and then you can fill out an NDA and get the financials and run an analysis to see if it's profitable, if it'll replace your salary, so that you can go all in on the business. And it's a great option. Biz Buy Sell is one. I think LoopNet's another, and then you can even use Biz Scout, which is Cody Sanchez's platform that she recently launched. Those are all different listing sites where you can find businesses. But in my opinion, those aren't the best deals, because at that point you have to work with a business broker, and then you have to pay them a pretty big cut of the money. Versus just talking to an owner directly, you don't have to pay that business broker fee. Because the business broker is essentially like a real estate agent, but honestly their cuts are quite a bit more, because businesses are going to be more expensive than real estate in a lot of cases. So you could be paying quite a bit. I know I was looking at a laundromat and it was, I think, $300,000, but I think the percentage that they charged was 5% or something. I was going to end up paying 20 to 30 grand just to the business broker. And that's a lot of money. So I don't know, it's kind of up to y'all, but those are some options to find deals. There's gonna be a couple questions you wanna ask the owner when you get them on the phone. First and foremost, you wanna understand why they're selling. Typically they'll bring up some issues that come up that are causing them to sell, or maybe it's a retirement. Whatever the reason is, you wanna understand it, because that'll really determine whether it's something you wanna move forward with. The second is you wanna understand their involvement day to day. I know for me, I don't want to be operating the business day to day. I would rather hire somebody to operate it for me. And if it's already set up that way, that's ideal, because then you don't have to be in the weeds on it. Because I know if I'm trying to get out of my 9-to-5 grind, I'm not trying to trade my 9-to-5 for the grind of business ownership where I'm working in my business all day. You know, for instance, if I'm doing a laundromat, I don't want to have to be folding clothes all day or doing all the nitty gritty. That's why I'm buying the businesses, so that other people do it and I make more money from it. And then the last question you're going to want to ask is, what's their biggest headache running it? Because with any business, there's going to be some headaches that come up, and there's going to be things that annoy you. So just understanding it going in, whether it's something that you can deal with or put up with, you want to have that up front. It'll come up typically during due diligence as you dig in, but make sure you're asking second and third level questions to really dig in and understand what are the challenges with running this business, and is that something that I'm okay with going into. So, all right, but Tony, I don't have any money to invest in a business. How do I acquire a $300,000 business? All right, so there's a couple ways you can finance a deal, and one of them is cash if you have the money. If it's a small deal and you have the money, you know, go ahead and use the cash. But personally, I've always used debt or leverage to basically pay for it. And number one is there's something called SBA loans. It's Small Business Administration loans. They're backed by the government. It's similar to an FHA loan, although not exactly the same. SBA loan basically allows you to get up to 90% of the purchase price towards a business, and it does have to match certain requirements in order to qualify. But then you only have to come up with 10% down payment out of pocket. So say it's a $300,000 business, you only have to come up with 30 grand in order to buy it. So that's one option. Those are a little bit hard for laundromats or cash businesses like vending machines, because it's hard to see exactly what the numbers are, because that is required for an SBA loan. And then number two is gonna be seller finance. And it can be a combination of seller finance with cash or with another means of financing. But most boring businesses, or most small businesses, are bought through a combination of seller finance. It'll be called something different. It's also called owner financed, or it's called like a self-liquidating asset, in that the profits from the business pay for the loan, if that makes sense. Basically, you're saying, okay, I'll pay you $300,000 at a 6% interest, and you use the profits from the business in order to pay it off with monthly payments. So it's really like the ways to make a boring business really work well for you and get you a high ROI is to do some version of a self-liquidating asset, having that type of structure in your deal, because buying it all cash, your ROI is going to be quite a bit lower, because you're putting so much capital into it that you could be deploying elsewhere, rather than, if you just put $30,000 down, you have all the cash that you might have saved up. Instead of spending $300,000 cash, you have $270,000 cash on the sidelines that you can invest elsewhere, and then your money, your asset is paying for itself because you're making monthly payments. I hope that makes sense, but I'm happy to do another video on that to explain seller finance in general, because it's a very, very big term, and it's very complicated. But those are some ways to do it. Obviously, cash, I mentioned earlier, you can buy it all cash. You might be able to get a private loan from somebody. Maybe you have a rich uncle that you can borrow from, and you negotiate some sort of percent interest that you pay them. Or if you have partners that have money, you can structure a percentage of the profits that you share with them. I don't necessarily recommend those personally, but absolutely is another option you can do. If you want a real world example of running a boring business, go grab that free vending machine playbook that I linked in the description. That's how I went from $0 to profitable within just a couple of weeks. All the mistakes that I made and all the things that I learned along the way. So go check that out, and I will see y'all in the next video. Peace.